Hi guys. For our group we have Liliana, Gina, and myself, and we chose to talk about cognitivism, its history, the theories behind it, and what it looks like in a classroom.
So what is cognitivism theory? Cognitivism is a learning theory that focuses on how information is received, organized, stored, and retrieved by the mind. It uses the mind as an information processor, like a computer. Therefore, cognitivism looks beyond observable behavior, viewing learning as an internal mental process. And then we have a video to show you that goes a little bit more in depth on cognitivism.
Yeah, I'm going to call it right now. I think I found the single biggest productivity hack of 2021. It's this Google Chrome extension called Speechify, and it literally does my
Cognitivism. The learning style that best reflects how I learn is cognitivism. The use of tools such as metaphors, mental maps, and organization help my brain process information. Information that is easy to access and understand is easy to learn. Repetition is important to cognitivists for retention and to build schemas in the brain. A good example of this is practicing your multiplication tables. Organization is another important tool for effectively building schema. It is important when working with a cognitive learner to consider cognitive load. The way information is presented can over or underload working memory. Using strategies such as chunking, scaffolding, and instructional design can ensure a student's cognitive load is appropriate. I have identified 3 technology tools that I think would be helpful or effective for a cognitive learner like myself. The first tool is MindMap. MindMap is an interactive website that allows you to create mind and concept maps. Mind maps help organize information and visualize knowledge in the way our brains process it. My second tool is OneNote. OneNote is an online note-taking program that allows you to easily organize information as you type. You can create notebooks, sections, and pages to keep information easy to access and understand. My last tool is code.org. This is a great example of using scaffolding to build schemas. By learning in small steps, you build on your previous knowledge. Scaffolds are built in when students fulfill challenges and build on their previous learning. That is cognitivism.
Piaget's theory argues that we have to conquer 4 stages of cognitive development. First,
And now we're going to go into the history.
So basically, we talked about the history that cognitivism was developed initially as a response to behaviorism's view that learning was a reaction to stimulus. And the response became more well recognized in the 1950s. And some factors were that dissatisfaction with the behaviorist approach and simple emphasis on external rather than internal process, the development of better experimental methods, comparison between human and computer processing of information. So some philosophy of this was Plato, Aristotle, Hobbes, Descartes, and William Wannett, and these were some of the philosophers during this time period that helped with the development of cognitism. And then psychology is also contributed to psychology of cognitism, and this eventually emerged as a scientific discipline. Cognitive psychology began to replace psychoanalysis and behaviorism as the dominant approach to the study of psychology. So next, we were talking about the first theorist of cognitism, which is Jean Piaget, and he thought that a child's intelligence grows as the child and their body grows. His theory was developed when he was working at the Binet institution in the 1920s. He began developing his own thoughts and beliefs about children and children's intelligence. He basically said that children's minds are very active and they tend to build up their knowledge about the world. He explained how teachers must learn to see things from their own students' perspective. Next, we will be talking about Jean Piaget's 4 stages of development, which are sensomotor stage, which is for children from birth to 2 years old. And this is when infants are learning about the new world and life through their senses and actions. And they start developing cognitive abilities such as self-recognition, optic permanence, and deferred and representative play. The next stage is pre-operational stage, which is 2 to 7 years old. This is when toddlers and infants gain the ability to interpret the world through language and imagery. Children, as well as infants during this time period, are looking at the world using anatomism. This is a tendency for children to see that non-living things are alive and are actually they have feelings like people. The third stage of development is the concrete operational stage, which is 7 to 11 years old. This is when children in this stage begin thinking more logically about real incidences, and children start to understand the concept of conversation and interacting with other people. Children also become less egocentric and actually start thinking about how other people feel. The fourth stage is formal operational stage, which is 12 years old and up. This is when concrete operations are carried out on things, whereas formal operations are carried out on ideas. This is when adolescents can deal with abstract ideas. Gina Piaget also talked about schemes, which is defined as a cohesive, repeatable action sequence possessing of component actions that are tightly interconnected and governed by a core meaning. Children are born with this very basic structure in their brain in which then they can acquire full meaningful knowledge, the basic building block of bright actions and gathering awareness. A child's capability to learn increases as they get older and they are able to learn more about themselves.
So the second theorist is David Ausubel. He was an American psychologist and author of Educational Psychology, A Cognitive View. He introduced the meaningful learning theory as well as the subsumption theory, and he advocated for advanced organizers. David Ausubel's work impacted the fields of educational psychology, cognitive science, and then science education learning. In his book, he says that the most important single factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. Ascertain this and teach him accordingly. I think when Ausubel says ascertain this and teach him accordingly, he is telling teachers and educators that an important aspect in teaching students is to first find out what they know and then build on their prior knowledge. Ausubel's concepts and ideas are based on our cognitive structures in our brain, and then cognitive structure provides meaning and organization to experiences and guides both the processing of new information and the retrieval of stored information in our brains. So his first theory, the meaningful learning theory, Ausubel believed that there is an overall organization of knowledge, and new information can be incorporated into that already existing knowledge. He believed that that we should be having meaningful learning rather than just memorization, which is kind of what we've been talking about in our book, the Learning and Forgetting. And so learning new knowledge is based on what we already know. The subsumption theory is a theory that focuses on how individuals acquire and learn large chunks of information through visual means or text materials. So there's 4 key principles of the subsumption theory that David Ausubel created. And the first one is learners should be presented with the most general concepts first, and then their analysis. The second is the instructional materials should include new as well as previously acquired information. Comparisons between the two, the new and the old concepts, are crucial. Third, existing cognitive structures should not be developed, but merely just reorganized within the learner's memory. And fourth, the role of the instructor is to bridge this gap between what's already known and what is to be learned and what they're going to teach the class. Along with that, he really emphasized the importance of advanced organizers. He said the purpose of this is to provide a meaningful organizer that, once again, bridges the gap between what the students already know and what is going to be learned and what the teacher is going to teach them. And so here are just 4 types of organizers that Ausubel put into the subsumption theory that he thinks are relevant, which is the expository organizer, the narrative organizer, skimming organizers, and graphic organizers.
So our third theorist is Albert Bandura, which is mainly known for him creating the social cognitive theory. So this theory began as a social learning theory, but then it developed into what is known now as the social cognitive theory. So both mainly just describe how in a social context people acquire new behaviors through observation. The social learning theory is Bandura's broadened theory, which is the conceptualization of humanity as having the ability to not only be influenced by their environment, but also influence their environment and regulate their inner forces. So it just talks about the comparison between the outer and inner forces that influence a person. Both behaviors are rooted along the idea that learned behavior excludes thought and emotion. So the way people act has no thought into it, because in a way it kind of circulates the concept of monkey see, monkey do. Major contributions to the social learning theory are modeling, identification, and direct vicarious reinforcement. So vicarious reinforcement refers to the learning through observations of consequences of actions. So whatever you do, there's a consequence for it. And he had 3 main theories. The first one being reciprocal determinism, observational learning, and self-efficacy. So reciprocal determinism is that there are factors, their behavior influences the environment. The 3 factors that go with that are the individual, the environment, and the behavior, which all play a role within each other. And then for observational learning, it just means that it is obtained by observing someone else's behaviors and their consequence. Again, kind of emphasizing that there's a consequence to everything you do. And self-efficacy is the level of self-confidence in our abilities. So within this, there are 4 main levels. The first one being mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasion, and emotional states. An example of self-efficacy would be when a teacher shows good behaviors to others, kind of like students mimicking the behavior of the teacher as well. And observational learning goes into 2 different types of modelings, pro-social model and then the anti-social model, which is the pro-social being that the actions intended to benefit others, kind of like the socially accepted ones, Examples can be volunteer, sharing, showing compassion and kindness, and etc. And then the antisocial model are actions intended to be negative to others, the socially not accepted, which are the children copying their parents' bad behaviors or copying what their friends do that isn't accepted, even to the point where it can become where the abused students become the abusers, kind of like bullying.
So cognitivism in the classroom. These are 5 things that I learned as I was researching about it, and it was just saying that these would be helpful for teachers to apply while they're teaching. And so the first one is to remember and have your students just involve them in an activity that has students recall previously learned information and what was discussed in the class previously. The second is have them understand. So use activities that engage students and see how they interpret the information, see where the students are at. Then next would be apply, push your students to rely on what they've learned to figure out ways to succeed through fun activities. And then evaluate, have your students analyze information, dig into the material and weigh options in your information that you've learned. And lastly, create. Have creative activities that allow students to produce original ideas and so that they can address and organize their thoughts and new knowledge in the way that best suits them.
So next we will discuss how there is a cognitism learning approach, and cognitism learning strategies in the classroom are to have students reflect on their experiences, help students come up with brand new solutions to problems, whether that is in science, math, or English, encouraging discussion on the material being taught in the classroom, and then students also can explain and justify their own thinking. And then a cognitism learning in children for teachers to use is to help students retain and gain knowledge when learning new concepts and also being successful in the classroom. Finding the most effective way for each of your students to learn, whether they are a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learner. Also, teaching students how to take the bigger picture approach when learning. Next, we'll be discussing how cognitism is applied in elementary school, specifically in first grade with 6-year-olds, and the characteristics of cognitism throughout the classroom and throughout the children are the gross motor skills, which are the students can run, hop, skip, jump, or gallop. They can put together simple tumbling patterns, which would be involved in the classroom, can dance with music or a rhythmic beat. And some fine motor skills I also will discuss is students or children can copy shapes or letters, have more legible handwriting, can tie their shoelaces, can play a musical instrument. So some cognition milestones also would be for students or children to develop reasoning and logical skills, think before making decisions, can read slight words out loud or sound out words, begin to have a better sense and understanding of increments of time, days, weeks, months, and seasons. So next, in the elementary school for first grade, it can be applied in the classroom through these school implications of cognitism, which would be break into activities, assignments, small groups, so the students are interacting and have social skills. The teacher can also weave art into the classroom and to many aspects as possible, so having them do coloring, painting, or using crayons. And then she also needs to provide a variety of art materials for the students to use. And teachers also should have lots of opportunities for imagination and dramatic play, such as in the classroom and in recess. Next, we'll be discussing how in the elementary school up of the upper classes, 5th grade, 10 years old, children can develop cognitive skills such as memorizing facts, having fun with rules and logic, take pride in schoolwork, and can concentrate for longer periods of time. Cognitism can be applied in the classroom by the teacher giving structured complex projects with proper guidance to build on their abilities to be highly productive. The teacher can also give ongoing encouragement in the classroom and reinforcement for both the effort and results of the students. She also can have hands-on assignments such as for science and math projects and include independent time for reading and writing for the 5th graders as well.
So for middle school, which is about 12 to 14 years old, a few characteristics that they start to develop is they begin to think about abstract concepts. They begin to display logical thinking. Their memory abilities increase and they learn to multitask. And then at this age is when students really start to self-assess themselves. They ask themselves questions, direct their own learning, seek answers, and begin to develop a worldview and basic set of values. They think a lot about what ifs and talk through ways of solving problems. Again, a way a teacher can use cognitive development in this stage of school and students is again with the steps to have them remember. So they could make a list or write a paragraph on what they remember from last call. So like a recall activity, and then play a game that jogs their memory. If you already have a game in your classroom that you like to play or your students like to enjoy, or you can have them make a timeline of information that they've been learning in order of what you learned from beginning to end through that class period or whatever you like. Next would be to understand. So have your students understand what do they know. Maybe do a debate in the class or have small groups and a class discussion. Next would be apply that learning. So have your students work on projects or have them ask questions or answer questions on the board. Have students give examples and or demonstrate in front of the class on the whiteboard to see what they know. Next would be evaluate. So you can have your students make a graph to illustrate certain information and have students develop a questionnaire, then hand it out to fellow classmates. Really just engage them and see what they know and be able to ask their fellow classmates questions. And just they can work on it individually, together, in groups, or as a class. They can make a pros and cons list of what they're learning. And then lastly, have them be creative. So write a poem or story, draw a visual timeline with pictures and captions. I remember doing that in my 7th grade classroom for an English project, and that was a lot of fun. Create an art piece, so drawing, painting, etc., and create a song or game. So basically, whatever, just have a list of options that your students can do that is geared towards whatever they like, and they can be creative with whatever they're interested in to develop what they've been learning.
All right, for high school students ranging the ages of 15 to 18, we have a few characteristics. They begin with abstract thinking, so they think about possibilities and endless possibilities. Um, they reason from their known principles, as in like what they know already, and begin to form new ideas or questions. They consider other viewpoints, where they compare or debate ideas or other people's opinions. They want to establish immediate and long term personal goals, and they have the need to make their own plans. In the classroom, students demonstrate an increased ability to reason, make educated guesses, and distinguish fact from fiction. They begin to think outside the box. For example, the what ifs and what is, create solutions on how to resolve hypothetical scenarios, um, set their own goals for the future, serious decision making, maybe as to college, understand the consequence for their actions. Maybe failing a class can result in summer school, and making decisions based on their conscience. So basically, figuring out what's right from wrong in their mind, and writing and comprehending with complexity as their subjects. For example, maybe social studies, history, um, AP classes, and using a variety of strategies to search, use, and compare information from sources. Using numbers in real life situations as well. And a way to encourage cognitive learning in the classroom would be to include them in discussions about variety of topics, issues, and current events. Um, it would be helpful to open the floor to sharing their ideas, and even um, complimenting their thought out well ideas, because it may be difficult for them to share out loud, and overall helping them reevaluate their poor decision making when it comes to maybe making a mistake or an error that might impact them in the long term.
Here's the references we used and the sources and works cited. Thanks.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.